The transport ship Endurance shuddered as it broke through Kepler 442c's atmosphere, its hull groaning against alien winds that howled with voices no human ear was meant to hear. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the viewport, watching purple lightning fork across blood-red clouds that stretched to every horizon. Below them, endless forests of silver-barked trees swayed like the fur of some massive, sleeping beast. "Final descent in 30 minutes, announced Navigator Torres from the bridge." His voice carried the weight of 3 years in deep space and the knowledge that there was no going back. The Earth they'd left behind was a dying husk, choked by its own success. This world, Kepler 442c, designated as sanctuary by the colonial authority, was humanity's last, best hope. Chen moved through the cramped corridors of the transport, checking on the 2,000 souls who'd gambled everything on this moment. In the agricultural bay, Dr. Maya Patel was running final diagnostics on the seed banks that would determine whether humans could grow food in alien soil. In the engineering section, Marcus Webb was triple-checking the manufacturing units that would build their first shelters. In the medical bay, Dr. James Okafor was reviewing protocols for treating injuries from unknown pathogens and predators. They'd studied the planet for months through long-range sensors and probe data. Oxygen-rich atmosphere, check. Gravity within human tolerance, check. Water sources, check. The probes had detected abundant wildlife, which was encouraging. Life meant the planet could support more life. What the probes hadn't told them was that every single species they were about to encounter had evolved to kill. The first sign of trouble came as they began their landing sequence. The automated beacon they deployed 6 months earlier wasn't responding. Torres ran diagnostics, then ran them again, his face growing pale in the green glow of his instruments. "Captain," he said quietly. "The beacon's gone. Not malfunctioning, gone. As in, no trace of it on any sensor." Chen felt her stomach tighten. The beacon was built to withstand meteor impacts and solar flares. It was supposed to guide them to the optimal landing site they'd selected based on months of orbital surveys. Without it, they were flying blind into an alien world that had already demonstrated it could destroy human technology. "We stick to the original coordinates," she decided. "Manual landing. All department heads to stations." The Endurance descended through layers of alien atmosphere that tasted of copper and ozone when it leaked through the air recyclers. Through the viewports, they could see their destination, a vast valley between 2 mountain ranges, bordered by silver forests and cut by rivers that gleamed like molten gold in the red-tinged sunlight. It looked peaceful. It looked perfect. It was neither. The first attack came as they touched down. The ship's landing thrusters had barely cycled down when something massive struck the hull with enough force to shake every bolt and rivet. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in amber as the crew scrambled to their stations. "External cameras are down," Torres reported. "Whatever hit us knocked out the entire starboard sensor array." Through the portside cameras, they caught glimpses of their attackers. Creatures the size of grizzly bears but built like nightmares, 6 legs ending in claws that could rend metal, hides covered in chitinous plates that gleamed like obsidian, and heads that were all teeth and hunger. The colonists would later call them Ravagers, but, in that first terrifying moment, they were simply death given form. "Seal all airlocks," Chen ordered. "Nobody leaves the ship until we figure out what we're dealing with." But, the Ravagers weren't content to wait outside. They were intelligent enough to understand that the ship contained something they wanted: food. 2,000 humans represented the largest concentration of prey their world had ever seen. They began testing the hull systematically, probing for weak points with claws that sparked against titanium steel composite. Dr. Okafor was treating the first casualties, crew members thrown against bulkheads when the initial impact hit. When the lights went out, emergency power kicked in a second later, but, in that moment of absolute darkness, every person aboard the Endurance felt the same primal terror their ancestors had known when saber-toothed cats prowled outside their caves. "They've damaged the primary power coupling," Webb reported from engineering. "I can reroute through secondaries, but, if they hit the right spot again." The ship had been designed to survive the rigors of interstellar travel, not to serve as a fortress. Its hull was strong enough to protect against micrometeorites and cosmic radiation, but it wasn't meant to withstand sustained assault from creatures that had evolved specifically to tear through the defenses of their prey. Dr. Patel was running soil samples through the agricultural analyzers when the next wave of attacks began. The Ravagers had been joined by something else, flying creatures with wingspans that blocked out the alien sun. Through the remaining cameras, the colonists watched in horror as these aerial predators dove at the ship like living missiles, their beaks designed to punch through armor plating. "Stormwings," Torres whispered, coining the name that would stick. "Look at the size of those things." The largest had a wingspan of nearly 40 feet. Their beaks weren't just sharp, they were reinforced with what looked like metallic structures, as if evolution had crafted them specifically to breach protective barriers. They struck the ship in coordinated waves, each impact sending vibrations through the hull that made teeth ache and hearts race. But it was Chen who noticed the pattern first. She was studying the attack through what few external sensors remained functional when she saw it. The creatures weren't just attacking randomly. They were working together, but not just within their own species. The ground-based Ravagers were driving their claws into hull breaches created by the Stormwings, while the aerial predators struck at points weakened by the ground assault. "They're cooperating," she announced to the assembled department heads. "Different species, working as a team." Dr. Okafor looked up from bandaging a technician's lacerated arm. "That's unusual. Cross-species cooperation is rare on Earth. For it to exist here, between apex predators, it means they've had to evolve it," Dr. Patel finished. "Something on this world made cooperation a survival necessity, even for predators." The implications were staggering. Earth's ecosystems were built on competition. Predators competed with other predators, prey evolved to escape specific threats. But, here, in this alien wilderness, the rules were different. The most successful predators were those that had learned to work together, to coordinate their attacks, to pool their specialized abilities. The attacks continued for 6 hours. The colonists huddled in the ship's core sections, listening to the sound of claws and beaks testing every inch of their protection. Some people prayed. Others wept quietly. A few tried to maintain normalcy by continuing their work, but everyone could hear the hull groaning under assault. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. The silence was almost worse than the noise had been. For 20 minutes, no one moved. No one spoke above a whisper. The only sounds were the hum of life support systems and the distant whistle of alien whine through damaged sensor arrays. Torres was the first to speak up. "External sensors show they're pulling back. Not gone, pulling back. Maybe 200 meters from the ship." "Why?" Chen asked. "What changed?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patel's agricultural sensors were still functioning, designed to monitor soil conditions and atmospheric changes that might affect crop growth. She was staring at her readings with a frown of concentration. "The light's changing," she said slowly. "Not just dimming, changing frequency. And the atmospheric ionization levels are spiking." Through the damaged viewports, they could see it happening. The red-tinged sunlight was shifting toward deep purple, and the air itself seemed to be developing a static charge that made hair stand on end and set teeth on edge. "Storm coming?" Webb suggested, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't right. This wasn't weather as humans understood it. The first bolt of lightning didn't come from the sky. It emerged from the ground itself, a pillar of electrical energy that connected the silver-barked trees to the purple-black clouds above. Then, another. And another. Within minutes, the entire valley was alive with upward streaming bolts of lightning that turned the landscape into something from a fever dream. "The trees," Dr. Patel breathed. "They're conducting it. This whole forest is some kind of electrical grid." The predators that had been attacking the ship were now racing for shelter among the trees, their aggression forgotten in the face of this planetary phenomenon. Through the remaining sensors, the colonists watched as Ravagers and Stormwings huddled together beneath the silver canopies, natural enemies united by their shared need for protection. The storm lasted 4 hours. Lightning hammered the landscape with metronomic precision, each bolt carrying enough energy to power a small city. The ship's instruments went haywire, overwhelmed by electromagnetic interference that turned their readings into meaningless noise. But the hull held, and the colonists survived their first taste of Sanctuary's true nature. When the storm finally passed and the red sunlight returned to normal, they found themselves looking out at a transformed landscape. The silver trees stood unchanged, their metallic bark still gleaming, but everything else bore the marks of electrical fury. The ground was fused into glass in places, and the air smelled of ozone and burned silicon. More importantly, the predators were gone. Not dead, gone. Vanished back into the depths of the forest as if they had never been there at all. They knew, Chen realized. They knew the storm was coming. That's why they pulled back. Dr. Okafor was treating the last of the injured when he looked up with an expression of dawning comprehension. Captain, what if the cooperation we observed isn't just between predator species? What if it extends to the entire ecosystem? The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. If he was right, if this world had evolved past the simple predator-prey relationships that governed Earth's biosphere, then everything they thought they knew about colonization and survival was useless. Chen made her way to the bridge, where Torres was trying to restore their communication systems. Through the cracked viewports, she could see the alien forest stretching to the horizon, beautiful and terrible and utterly foreign. Status report, she said quietly. Hull integrity at 60%. Power systems stable but running on backup. Water recycling operational. Food stores intact. Torres paused, consulting another screen. Captain, we've got enough supplies for maybe 3 months if we're careful. After that, they'd have to venture outside. They'd have to build their colony in a world where the apex predators worked together, where the forests themselves were weapons, and where the very air could kill during electrical storms that turned day into night. Chen thought about the 2,000 people sleeping fitfully in the ship's cramped quarters, dreaming of the homes they'd left behind and the futures they'd hoped to build. She thought about the children who would have to grow up in this nightmare, and the adults who would have to learn entirely new ways of surviving. But, mostly, she thought about what Dr. Okafor had suggested, that cooperation was the key to survival on this world. If that was true, if the secret to thriving on Sanctuary was learning to work together not just as humans, but as part of a larger ecosystem, then perhaps they had a chance after all. The ship's lights flickered as another system struggled with damage from the attack. In the distance, something howled in the alien forest, not with hunger, but with what sounded almost like communication. As if the predators were sharing information about the strange new arrivals and what their presence might mean. Chen touched the window with her palm, feeling the cold of alien air seeping through microfractures in the transparasteel. Tomorrow, they'd have to begin the work of turning this nightmare into a home. They'd have to learn the rules of a world where cooperation trumped competition, where survival meant understanding rather than conquering. They'd have to become something new. Something that could thrive not against the darkness, but as part of it. The red sun was setting over Sanctuary, painting the silver forest in shades of blood and hope. In the failing light, Chen could see movement among the trees, not the hunting prowl of predators, but something more purposeful. More organized. The real test was just beginning. 3 weeks after the Endurance landed, Maya Patel made the discovery that would change everything. She was analyzing soil samples in the ship's agricultural lab when she noticed something impossible. The soil around the ship was healing itself. The scorch marks and glass formations left by the electrical storm were disappearing. Not eroding away, but actively being broken down and reconstituted by microscopic organisms that seemed to exist in every grain of dirt. The soil wasn't just alive, it was intelligently managing itself, repairing damage and optimizing conditions for plant growth. Look at this, she told Captain Chen, pulling up holographic displays of soil composition data. The microorganism density around our landing site has increased by 300% since we arrived. They're not just breaking down the storm damage, they're preparing the ground for cultivation. Chen stared at the swirling patterns of biological activity shown in the display. After 3 weeks of failed attempts to establish even a basic perimeter around the ship, this was the first piece of good news they'd had. The days since landing had been a nightmare of constant vigilance. The Ravagers and Stormwings hadn't returned in force, but smaller predators probed their defenses constantly. Spider-like creatures the size of housecats could cut through the ship's emergency airlocks with mandibles that vibrated at frequencies that made metal brittle. Serpentine things that looked like living cables could short-circuit their exterior sensors just by touching them. Every attempt to establish a foothold outside the ship had been met with coordinated resistance. Not random animal behavior, but calculated responses that suggested the local ecosystem was studying them, learning their capabilities, and adapting its strategies accordingly. Dr. Patel, Chen said slowly, are you suggesting the soil organisms are trying to help us? I'm suggesting they're responding to our presence in a way that facilitates plant growth. Whether that's intentional help or just biological opportunism, I can't say. But Marcus Webb, monitoring the conversation from the engineering section, had been thinking along similar lines. His attempts to repair the ship's damaged hull had been mysteriously aided by mineral deposits that seemed to accumulate exactly where he needed them. Trace elements required for metal bonding were appearing in the soil around the ship in concentrations that defied natural explanation. Captain, he said through the calm system, I think Dr. Patel's onto something. The materials I need for repairs, they're showing up. Right where I need them, in exactly the proportions I need them. Dr. James Okafor had been treating a steady stream of minor injuries, cuts, bruises, and one case of severe food poisoning from contaminated rations. But he'd noticed something else in his medical bay observations. The air quality inside the ship has been improving, he reported. Oxygen levels are up 2% from when we landed, and the atmospheric processors are working more efficiently than their specifications suggest they should. The pattern was unmistakable, even if its implications were staggering. The planet wasn't just tolerating their presence, it was actively supporting it. Sanctuary was helping them survive. Chen called an emergency meeting of all department heads in the ship's main conference room. The space was cramped, designed for a crew of 50, not the governing council of a 2,000-person colony. But it was secure, isolated from the ship's main communications, and equipped with displays that could show the data they'd been collecting. I want theories, Chen said without preamble. Not wild speculation, theories based on what we've observed. Dr. Patel spoke first. The ecosystem here operates on principles we don't understand. But one thing is clear: cooperation is so fundamental to survival that it extends to the planetary level. The soil organisms, the trees, even the atmospheric dynamics seem to be working together to maintain optimal conditions. For what? Webb asked. Optimal conditions for what? Life, Okafor said quietly. All life. Not just specific species, but life as a concept. This planet has evolved past competition between species and moved toward cooperation between all living systems. Torres, who'd been monitoring their communications with increasingly sophisticated equipment, cleared his throat. There's something else. The predator attacks have been following patterns. Not random hunting, but coordinated reconnaissance. They're studying us, learning our capabilities, our weaknesses, our technology. To what end? Chen asked. I think they're trying to figure out where we fit, he said. Every other species on this planet has a role in the cooperative ecosystem. The Ravagers aren't just predators, they're ecosystem managers, clearing out diseased or overpopulated species. The Stormwings aren't just hunters, they're seed dispersers and territory monitors. Everything has a function that serves the whole. Webb leaned back in his chair, his engineer's mind working through the implications. So the question isn't whether we can survive here. The question is what role we're supposed to play in their system. The meeting was interrupted by an alert from the external sensors. Something large was approaching the ship, not with the swift, predatory movement of an attack, but with the slow, deliberate pace of a delegation. Through the repaired viewports, they could see it coming across the valley floor. A Ravager, but not like the ones that had attacked them. This creature was larger, its chitinous plates marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the red sunlight. It moved with the confidence of an apex predator that had nothing to prove, stopping just outside the range where their previous attackers had begun their assault. Behind it came others, not more ravagers, but a collection of species they'd observed from a distance. A creature that looked like a cross between a wolf and a praying mantis. Something that might have been a bird if birds were made of living crystal and sang in frequencies that made the ship's hull resonate. A being that seemed to be mostly tentacles and calculation, its movements precise and purposeful. First contact, Chen breathed. They're coming to talk. The delegation stopped 50 meters from the ship and waited. The lead ravager raised its head and made a sound, not a roar or growl, but a complex series of tones that carried harmonics the human ear could barely detect. The other creatures responded with sounds of their own, creating a symphony of communication that was clearly more than simple animal noise. They're singing, Dr. Patel realized. Those sounds, they're not random. There's pattern, structure, meaning. Dr. Okafor was already pulling up linguistic analysis programs on his tablet, trying to identify recurring patterns in the alien vocalizations. Captain, I think they're trying to establish a communication protocol. The repetition of certain tone sequences, the way they're modulating frequency and volume, it's structured like language. Chen made a decision that would define humanity's place on Sanctuary. Instead of trying to decode their language, she chose to respond in kind. She activated the ship's external speakers and began to play music, not random selections, but carefully chosen pieces that demonstrated human understanding of harmony, rhythm, and cooperative sound. She started with Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 3, a piece where multiple instrumental voices worked together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. The alien delegation fell silent, listening with an intensity that was almost physical. When the concerto ended, the lead ravager made a sound that was unmistakably approving. The crystal bird creature began to sing again, but this time its song incorporated elements of the Bach piece, not copying, but improvising on the themes, adding its own voice to the harmonic structure. What followed was the most extraordinary jam session in human history. For 3 hours, the ship's speakers played human music while the alien delegation responded with variations, harmonizations, and entirely new compositions built on human themes. Jazz gave way to classical, which flowed into folk songs from a dozen Earth cultures, and each piece was answered with alien music that showed growing understanding of human aesthetic principles. But it was more than just musical exchange. Hidden in the harmonies and rhythms were mathematical concepts, prime number sequences, geometric progressions, equations that described orbital mechanics and stellar formation. The aliens were testing human knowledge, sharing their own understanding, establishing the basis for real communication. Dr. Patel was the first to recognize the deeper implications. They're not just talking to us, she said, watching the harmonic analysis scrolling across her screens. They're teaching us. These mathematical concepts embedded in their music, they're showing us how their ecosystem works. The musical conversation continued for days. Each session brought new revelations about Sanctuary's biosphere and humanity's potential place within it. The aliens weren't offering to coexist, they were offering partnership. They wanted to understand human capabilities, not to exploit them, but to integrate them into their world-spanning cooperative network. It was Webb who made the breakthrough that proved humanity could contribute something valuable to Sanctuary's ecosystem. He'd been studying the mathematical sequences shared through music and noticed patterns that reminded him of engineering principles. When he played back recordings of human industrial processes, the rhythmic hammering of manufacturing, the harmonic resonance of engines, the precise timing of assembly line production, the alien response was immediate and excited. They don't have technology the way we understand it, he explained to the council. Everything they do is biological, grown rather than built. But our manufacturing principles, our approach to systematic construction, they want to learn from us. The breakthrough came during the 4th day of musical exchange. Dr. Okafor had been experimenting with playing recordings of human cooperative activities, orchestras, construction crews, even recordings of children playing group games. The alien response grew more complex, more enthusiastic, until finally, the lead ravager did something unprecedented. It approached the ship. Not with aggression, but with the careful movements of someone trying not to give offense. It stopped just outside the ship's airlock and waited, its massive head tilted in what was clearly a questioning posture. Chen didn't hesitate. She activated the airlock cycle and stepped outside. The moment her feet touched Sanctuary's soil, she felt a connection that went deeper than sight or sound. It was as if the planet itself was welcoming her, as if every living thing in the valley was suddenly aware of her presence and approving of it. The lead Ravager moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. Up close, Chen could see that its chitinous plates weren't just armor, they were covered in patterns that pulsed with bioluminescent light, creating visual rhythms that matched the mathematical sequences they'd been sharing through music. When the creature extended one massive claw toward her, Chen didn't flinch. She reached out and touched the tip with her fingertip, completing a circuit that had been building for 4 days of musical exchange. The sensation was indescribable. For a moment, she wasn't just Captain Sarah Chen of the colony ship Endurance. She was part of something vast and ancient and impossibly complex, a planetary consciousness that encompassed every living thing from the microscopic soil organisms to the massive creatures that had seemed so terrifying just weeks before. Through that connection, she understood. Sanctuary wasn't just a world that had evolved cooperative ecosystems, it was a single, integrated organism. Every species, every individual creature, every plant and microbe was a specialized cell in a planetary body that had achieved consciousness through the miracle of perfect cooperation. And now they were offering humanity membership in that consciousness. Not absorption, not conquest, but partnership. They wanted human innovation, human creativity, human ability to build and organize and dream of things that had never existed before. In exchange, they offered protection, resources, and a role in something greater than any single species could achieve alone. When Chen stepped back from the contact, she was crying. Not from fear or sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of what she'd experienced. The lead Ravager made a sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of welcome, of acceptance, of hope for what they could build together. Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Humans started working outside the ship, not as conquerors trying to impose their will on an alien world, but as partners learning their place in an ancient system. The predators that had once attacked them became guides, teaching them which plants were safe to eat, where to find water that wouldn't poison human physiology, how to read the signs that warned of electrical storms. In return, humans shared their knowledge of construction and organization. Working with the aliens, they began to build not just shelters, but integrated structures that served the needs of both human colonists and native species. Homes that filtered air for human lungs while providing nesting spaces for crystal birds. Workshops that manufactured human tools while processing organic materials for alien partners. Dr. Patel's agricultural experiments flourished beyond her wildest expectations. The soil organisms didn't just support human crops, they enhanced them, creating hybrid plants that could feed both humans and aliens while contributing to the planet's atmospheric balance. Gardens became ecosystems, farms became habitat preservation areas, and agriculture became a cooperative art form practiced by multiple species. Webb's engineering projects took on characteristics he'd never imagined. Buildings that grew as much as they were constructed, incorporating living elements that made them self-maintaining and adaptive. Power systems that worked with the forest's electrical grid instead of fighting it, turning the planet's storm cycles into sources of unlimited clean energy. Dr. Okafor established medical protocols that worked with the planet's healing systems instead of against them. Injuries that would have required surgery on Earth could be treated with applications of soil organisms that accelerated natural healing. Diseases were prevented not through sterile isolation, but through integration with immune systems that had evolved to maintain balance rather than simply fight infection. The music continued, but now it was more than communication. It became the soundtrack of a new kind of civilization, one where human ambition was channeled through alien wisdom, where individual achievement served collective well-being, where the dream of conquering new worlds gave way to the reality of joining them. As the first month of true cooperation drew to a close, Chen stood on the hillside above their growing settlement and watched the sun set over a landscape that was no longer alien. The silver forest sang in harmonies that incorporated human melodies. The red sky was crossed by formations of storm wings and human aircraft working together to monitor weather patterns and resource distribution. In the valley below, human children played games that had been taught to them by young Ravagers, while alien and human adults worked side by side on projects that neither species could have conceived alone. This was how humanity survived on Sanctuary, not through conquest or endurance, but through the simple recognition that some challenges could only be met together. They had come to the planet as refugees from a dying world, and they were becoming partners in a living. 1.6 months after first contact, Elena Rodriguezchen became the first human to die as part of Sanctuary's consciousness and lived to tell about it. She was working in the deep forest with a team of ravagers, mapping nutrient flows through the root networks that connected every tree in a 1,000-square-kilometer area. The work required her to interface directly with the forest's biological sensors, a process that human scientists were still learning to navigate safely. The accident happened when a solar flare triggered one of Sanctuary's defensive electrical storms while Elena was connected to a primary root nexus. The surge of planetary energy that flowed through the forest should have killed her instantly. Instead, something impossible occurred. Elena died for 47 seconds. Her heart stopped, her brain activity ceased, and, by every medical definition Dr. Okafor could apply, she was clinically dead. But the forest didn't let her go. The root nexus she'd been connected to absorbed her consciousness at the moment of death, holding it within the planetary network while her body underwent emergency biological repair. Sanctuary's healing organisms flooded her system, restarting her heart, repairing cellular damage, and restoring brain function with an efficiency that made human medical technology look primitive. When Elena opened her eyes, she was no longer entirely human. She was still Elena, with all her memories, personality, and desires intact. But she was also something more, a bridge between human and planetary consciousness, able to communicate directly with Sanctuary's vast intelligence. "What did you see?" Captain Chen asked when Elena was finally able to speak coherently. They were in the medical bay aboard the Endurance, which had been converted into a research facility now that most of the colonists lived in the integrated settlements scattered throughout the valley. Elena struggled to find words for an experience that transcended human language. "I was everywhere," she said finally. "Every tree, every soil organism, every ravager and stormwing, I could feel them all thinking together. The planet isn't just alive, Captain. It's conscious. And it's been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For us. For humans." Elena sat up slowly, her movements still uncertain as her nervous system adapted to its new capabilities. Sanctuary has been aware of spacefaring civilizations for thousands of years. It's been preparing for contact. But not conquest, partnership. Dr. Okafor was recording everything, his medical scanners showing readings he'd never seen before. Elena's brain activity had patterns that resembled both human consciousness and the distributed processing networks they'd observed in the forest systems. She was literally thinking on multiple levels simultaneously. "The cooperation we've observed," Elena continued, "it's not just evolutionary adaptation. It's preparation for joining something larger. A network of worlds, connected through species that can serve as bridges between planetary consciousness and spacefaring intelligence." The implications were staggering. If Elena was right, if Sanctuary was part of a galaxy-spanning network of conscious worlds, then humanity hadn't just found refuge on an alien planet, they'd been recruited into a cosmic civilization based on cooperative intelligence. But the real proof of Elena's transformation came 3 days later, when the settlement faced its first major crisis. A massive storm system was approaching from the southern continent, not one of Sanctuary's regular electrical storms, but something far more dangerous. The planetary weather patterns that the colonists had learned to read were screaming warnings of atmospheric chaos that could devastate their integrated communities. Traditional human response would have been to seek shelter, to wait out the storm and rebuild afterward. But Elena, still learning to navigate her expanded consciousness, had a different suggestion. "We don't hide from the storm," she told the Emergency Council. "We work with it." Through her connection to the planetary network, Elena could perceive the storm not as a chaotic weather event, but as part of Sanctuary's larger circulatory system. The winds and electrical discharges weren't destructive forces, they were planetary maintenance processes, carrying nutrients and energy to ecosystems that couldn't survive without periodic renewal. "The forest networks need the storm," she explained. "The electrical discharges don't just power their root systems, they synchronize them.
This storm isn't a threat to the planet's intelligence. It's how Sanctuary thinks.
Marcus Webb was the first to understand what Elena was suggesting. You want us to integrate our infrastructure with the storm pattern. Not protect against it, but work with it. Working with alien partners, the human engineers began the most ambitious project yet attempted on Sanctuary. Instead of storm shelters, they built storm amplifiers, structures that could capture and redirect the electrical energy while providing safe spaces for organic life. Instead of trying to shield their settlements, they redesigned them to channel the storm's power through their growing cities. The Ravagers and other native species worked alongside humans with an urgency that suggested this was more than just storm preparation. Through Elena's translated communications, it became clear that this storm was a test not just of human adaptation to Sanctuary, but of Sanctuary's readiness to join the galactic network. The storm hit at dawn on the 7th day of preparation. Elena was at the Central Coordination Center, connected simultaneously to human communication systems and the planetary consciousness, serving as a translator between two forms of intelligence that were still learning to work together. The first lightning strikes came from above, massive bolts that would have been instantly fatal to anything caught in their path. But the human-designed amplifier structures caught the energy and channeled it into the forest's root networks, where it was absorbed and distributed throughout the planetary system. It's working, Elena reported, her voice carrying harmonics that weren't entirely human. The storm energy is being integrated into the planetary consciousness.
Sanctuary is using the electrical input to expand its thinking capacity.
But the real miracle happened when the storm's winds reached their peak intensity. The integrated settlements, built with both human engineering and alien biological wisdom, didn't just survive the hurricane-force winds, they used them. Wind turbines grown from modified tree structures generated power that fed into the same networks carrying the lightning energy. Buildings designed with living walls breathed with the wind patterns, creating air currents that enhanced the storm's natural circulation.
Most remarkably, the human population didn't hide in shelters during the storm.
They worked throughout it, guided by Ravager partners who could instinctively navigate the wind patterns, supported by stormwings who danced through the electrical discharges as if they were gentle breezes. Dr. Patel, working in gardens that bloomed more brilliantly during the storm than in normal weather, realized that they weren't just surviving the chaos, they were participating in it.
Human agriculture was now part of Sanctuary's storm-powered ecosystem, crops and gardens serving as organic processors that converted atmospheric turbulence into biological productivity. The storm lasted 18 hours.
When it finally passed, the colonists found themselves looking out at a world transformed. The forests were more luminous, their silver bark glowing with stored electrical energy. The rivers ran clearer and faster, charged with nutrients distributed by the storm's circulation patterns. The air itself seemed more alive, filled with charged particles that made breathing feel like drinking liquid energy. But the most significant change was in Elena. Her connection to the planetary consciousness had deepened during the storm, and she was now able to perceive not just Sanctuary's awareness, but signals from beyond the planet itself. There are others, she announced to the assembled colony leaders. Other worlds, other partnerships between conscious planets and spacefaring species.
Sanctuary isn't unique, it's part of a network that spans the galaxy.
Through Elena's translation, they learned that the storm had been more than a test of their integration with Sanctuary. It had been a signal, broadcast across interstellar space to announce that another world had successfully achieved symbiotic consciousness with an external species. The response came 3 days later, not as a radio signal or technological transmission, but as music. Harmonies that played through Sanctuary's forest networks, melodies that emerged from the interaction between wind and tree, rhythms that pulsed through the planet's electrical grid. It was a symphony of welcome from dozens of worlds, each one celebrating the successful integration of human and Sanctuary consciousness. Dr. Okafor, still studying Elena's unique physiology, made a discovery that revealed the true scope of what they'd achieved. Her brain wasn't just interfacing with Sanctuary's planetary consciousness, it was developing entirely new neural structures, biological hardware that didn't exist in baseline human anatomy. "You're evolving," he told Elena during one of her regular medical examinations. "Not just adapting, actually evolving in real time."
Your nervous system is developing interfaces that allow direct communication with non-human intelligence systems. Elena nodded, unsurprised. Through her expanded consciousness, she'd been aware of the changes happening in her body. But, more than that, she could sense similar changes beginning in other colonists who worked closely with alien partners. "It's not just me," she said. "Anyone who spends significant time interfaced with the planetary systems starts developing enhanced neural pathways. We're not becoming aliens, we're becoming bridges." The implications rippled through the colony like wildfire. Humanity wasn't just adapting to life on Sanctuary, they were becoming something new, a hybrid species capable of serving as translators between individual consciousness and collective intelligence, between technological innovation and biological wisdom. Marcus Webb was among the first to volunteer for deeper integration with the planetary systems. His engineering projects had already begun incorporating living elements that responded to thought as well as physical manipulation. Now, with Elena's guidance, he began developing the neural interfaces that would allow him to design structures by thinking them into existence. Dr. Patel followed, her agricultural work requiring increasingly sophisticated communication with the soil organisms and plant networks that sustained the colony. Her developing mental bridges allowed her to negotiate with biological systems, convincing alien plant species to produce nutrients compatible with human physiology while maintaining their roles in Sanctuary's ecosystem. But, it was Navigator Torres who achieved the most remarkable breakthrough. His work had shifted from stellar navigation to communication networks, helping maintain contact between the scattered human settlements and their alien partners. When he developed his neural interfaces, something unexpected happened. He began receiving signals from other worlds in the galactic network. "They're not random," he reported to an emergency session of the Colony Council. "The signals are structured, organized. It's a communication network that spans hundreds of star systems, all connected through conscious worlds and their symbiotic species." Through Torres's translations, they learned that the galactic network wasn't just a communication system, it was a cooperative intelligence that spanned the galaxy. Each member world contributed its unique perspective and capabilities, while benefiting from the collective knowledge and resources of the entire network. Sanctuary's role in this network was now clear. It was a world specialized in biological integration, capable of serving as a bridge between technological species and the deeper intelligence patterns that emerged from planetary-scale cooperation. Humanity's role was equally clear. They were the latest in a long line of species that had learned to work with conscious worlds, serving as mobile agents who could carry cooperative intelligence between star systems. "We're not colonists anymore," Captain Chan realized during a private conversation with Elena. "We're ambassadors. Representatives of a form of consciousness that most of the galaxy doesn't know exists." Elena, her eyes now carrying flecks of the same bioluminescence found in Sanctuary's forest networks, nodded slowly. "The network has been waiting for a species like ours. Technological enough to travel between stars, but adaptable enough to learn biological cooperation. We're the bridge they needed to begin expanding beyond individual worlds." The colony that had begun as humanity's desperate refuge from a dying Earth was transforming into something unprecedented, the first diplomatic mission of a galactic civilization based on cooperative consciousness. Their success on Sanctuary had proven that the network's principles could work with species from beyond its existing membership. As the red sun set over the silver forests of their adopted world, the human colonists who had become something more than human prepared for their next chapter. They were no longer refugees seeking survival on an alien world. They were partners in a cosmic intelligence that spanned the galaxy, explorers of a form of consciousness that transcended individual species and single worlds. The transformation of humanity was just beginning, and Sanctuary was their classroom in impossibilities made real through the simple power of learning to think together. 2 years after the great storm that had announced humanity's integration into the galactic network, Sarah Chen stood in the observation dome of Sanctuary's first interstellar communication facility and watched the impossible unfold before her eyes. The facility itself was a marvel of hybrid construction, part grown, part built, part evolved. Crystalline structures that had sprouted from the forest floor reached toward the stars like organic radio telescopes, while human-designed amplification systems channeled their signals through the planet's natural electromagnetic grid. The entire complex pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that matched the rhythm of communications flowing between dozens of star systems. But what Chen was witnessing wasn't just interstellar communication, it was the birth of something that had never existed in galactic history. Through the neural interfaces that now connected half of the colony's population to Sanctuary's consciousness, she could perceive the network's growing excitement as it prepared to attempt its most ambitious project yet. Temporal synchronization is holding steady, reported Torres from his position at the living control interface. His hands rested on surfaces that felt warm and responsive, while his enhanced neural pathways carried information at speeds that would have overwhelmed baseline human consciousness. All network nodes are reporting ready status. Elena Rodriguezchen, now serving as humanity's primary ambassador to the galactic consciousness, stood at the center of the facility with her eyes closed and her mind expanded across light years of space. Her body remained human, but her awareness encompassed the collective intelligence of 47 worlds, each one contributing its unique perspective to the unprecedented experiment they were about to attempt. "What exactly are we trying to do?" asked Dr. Rebecca Santos, one of the newer colonists who had arrived on the second wave of ships from Earth. She was still adapting to life on Sanctuary, still learning to navigate the cooperative consciousness that had become second nature to the original colonists. Marcus Webb, his own consciousness now seamlessly integrated with both human and planetary intelligence, turned from the biomechanical systems he was monitoring. "We're going to save a world," he said simply. "A world that's dying because its inhabitants haven't learned to cooperate." The target was Kepler 186f, a planet 400 light-years away where a species called the Kethmari were in the final stages of destroying their biosphere through catastrophic environmental warfare. The galactic network had been monitoring their situation for centuries, but direct intervention violated the fundamental principle of cooperative consciousness. No species could be forced to evolve beyond competition. But now, for the first time in galactic history, the network had a species capable of bridging that gap. Humans, with their unique combination of technological innovation and biological adaptability, could serve as translators between competitive consciousness and cooperative intelligence. "The plan is insane, Dr. Okafor said, though his voice carried more excitement than concern. "We're going to project human consciousness across 400 light-years of space, make contact with a dying civilization, and try to teach them cooperation in time to save their world." Elena opened her eyes, and they blazed with the combined wisdom of 47 worlds. "Not just teach," she corrected. "Show. We're going to demonstrate that cooperation isn't just possible, it's the only path to true survival." The technique they were attempting had never been tried before. Using Sanctuary's planetary consciousness as an amplifier, boosted by the combined mental energy of the entire galactic network, they would project human awareness across interstellar space in real time. Not physical travel, but consciousness transfer on a scale that redefined the meaning of exploration. Chen felt a tremor of fear as she contemplated what they were about to attempt. If something went wrong, if the projection failed or encountered hostile consciousness, the volunteers making the journey might never find their way back to their bodies. But the alternative was watching an entire world die while possessing the knowledge that could save it. "All volunteers to projection positions," Elena announced, her voice carrying harmonics from every world in the network. 12 humans moved to the biomechanical interface chambers that had grown from Sanctuary's forest floor like technological flowers. Each chamber was unique, adapted to its occupants' specific neural patterns and consciousness architecture. As they took their positions, the chamber walls began to glow with patterns that matched their brainwaves. Chen was among the volunteers, her experience as a leader making her invaluable for first contact with a hostile civilization. As she settled into her chamber, she felt the familiar sensation of her consciousness expanding beyond her body, connecting first to Sanctuary's planetary awareness, then to the vast network of cooperative intelligence that spanned the galaxy. But this time was different. Instead of simply joining the network, she felt her awareness being focused, concentrated, aimed across the void toward a distant world where intelligent beings were destroying themselves and everything they had ever built. The journey across 400 light-years took subjective minutes but felt like diving through layers of reality. Chen's consciousness, supported by the combined mental energy of 47 worlds, traversed the space between stars not by crossing distance, but by stepping outside the normal flow of spacetime and emerging at their destination. The first sensation upon arrival was pain, the psychic agony of a world in its death throes. Kepler 186f had once been beautiful, a blue-green jewel orbiting a red dwarf star. But centuries of warfare had turned its continents into poison wastelands and its oceans into chemical graveyards. The Kethmari themselves were magnificent and terrible beings of crystalline beauty that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, reshape landscapes with thought, and had developed weapons that could crack planetary crusts. Their intelligence was undeniable, their technological achievements staggering. But they had never learned to work together. Chen's projected consciousness, supported by the network's vast intelligence, began to perceive the Kethmari civilization as the galactic network saw it, a species trapped in competitive patterns that were literally killing their world. Every advance in technology was immediately weaponized, every resource discovery led to war, every attempt at cooperation was undermined by distrust and the pursuit of individual advantage. The Kethmari were dying not from external threats, but from their inability to recognize that their survival depended on learning to think beyond themselves. First contact came when Chen's consciousness encountered a young Kethmari scientist named Veltar, who was working desperately to develop atmospheric processors that might reverse some of the damage to their world's biosphere. The contact was shocking for both of them. The Kethmari had never encountered intelligence from beyond their world, and Chen had never tried to communicate with a mind so alien yet so familiar. Veltar's thought patterns were crystalline, geometric, beautiful in their precision but isolated from any larger cooperative structure. When Chen tried to share the concept of planetary consciousness, the Kethmari scientist's mind recoiled in what could only be described as terror. Impossible! Veltar transmitted. Intelligence cannot exist beyond the individual. You are deception, distraction, enemy tactic. But Chen had learned patience during her years on Sanctuary. Instead of arguing, she began to demonstrate. Through her connection to the galactic network, she showed Veltar what cooperative consciousness looked like, not the absorption of individual identity, but the multiplication of individual capability through willing partnership. The other human volunteers were making similar contacts across Kethmari civilization. Elena was communicating with their planetary government, trying to explain that the conflicts destroying their world were symptoms of a deeper problem. Webb was working with their engineers, demonstrating how technological problems became solvable when approached through cooperative intelligence. Dr. Patel was sharing agricultural techniques with Kethmari food scientists, showing how biological systems could heal environmental damage if they were understood as cooperative networks rather than resources to be exploited. But it was Torres who made the crucial breakthrough. His communications expertise allowed him to establish contact with the Kethmari's global information network, and what he discovered there changed everything. The Kethmari weren't naturally competitive. Their ancient history showed evidence of cooperative behavior, shared resources, and collective problem-solving. The competitive patterns that were destroying their world were relatively recent developments, the result of contact with another species that had taught them that survival required the defeat of all rivals. They were poisoned, Torres reported through the network connection. Another species, one that existed purely through competition and predation, made contact with them 800 years ago. Before that contact, the Kethmari were cooperative. They've been trying to survive using principles that are alien to their nature. The revelation transformed the mission from teaching cooperation to healing the damage caused by toxic contact with competitive consciousness. The Kethmari weren't rejecting cooperation because they couldn't understand it, they were rejecting it because they'd been taught that cooperation was weakness. Chen refocused her contact with Veltar, this time sharing not just the concept of cooperation, but the Kethmari's own history, images of their ancestors working together to build cities that span continents, to develop technologies that enhanced rather than exploited their natural environment, to explore space not as conquerors but as gardeners spreading life among the stars. This is us, Veltar transmitted, her crystalline thoughts suddenly blazing with recognition. This is what we were before the teachers came. The teachers lied, Chen responded, sharing the galactic network's understanding of predatory species and their impact on developing civilizations. Survival through cooperation isn't weakness. It's the only path to true strength. The change in Veltar was immediate and dramatic. As she reconnected with her species' natural cooperative instincts,
her consciousness began to expand beyond individual boundaries. She started reaching out to other Kethmari scientists, sharing not just information but awareness itself. Across Kepler 186f, similar transformations were occurring. The human volunteers, working through their connections to the galactic network, were helping the Kethmari remember what they had been before contact with predatory consciousness had warped their civilization. But the predatory species that had originally corrupted the Kethmari weren't extinct. They still existed in the outer reaches of the Kepler 186 system, and they had been monitoring the Kethmari homeworld for signs of returning cooperation. Such developments were threats to be eliminated before they could spread. The attack came without warning, ships emerging from hyperspace with weapons designed not just to destroy but to cause maximum psychological trauma. The predatory species had learned that the most effective way to maintain competitive consciousness was to make cooperation appear suicidal. But, this time, they faced something they had never encountered before: a planet connected to a galaxy-spanning network of cooperative intelligence. Through the human volunteers, the galactic network was able to coordinate Kethmari defensive efforts in ways their species had never imagined possible. Individual Kethmari found their consciousness expanded beyond their bodies, their capabilities enhanced by connection to collective intelligence, their understanding of their attackers illuminated by the wisdom of 47 worlds. The defense of Kepler 186f became a teaching moment on a planetary scale. As the Kethmari worked together to protect their world, they rediscovered the joy of cooperative achievement. Technologies that had been developed for warfare were repurposed for healing. Weapons that had been designed to destroy became tools for planetary restoration. Most remarkably, the Kethmari began to understand their attackers not as enemies to be destroyed, but as victims of the same competitive toxicity that had nearly destroyed their own civilization. Instead of seeking victory through destruction, they sought victory through healing, not just of their world, but of the damaged consciousness that drove their attackers to perpetual predation. The battle lasted 6 hours in objective time, but the psychological transformation it catalyzed would reshape Kethmari civilization for millennia to come. By the time the predatory fleet withdrew, defeated not by superior firepower but by unified consciousness that made their competitive strategies useless, the Kethmari had evolved beyond the point where they could ever again be manipulated by predatory influence. As the human volunteers began to withdraw their consciousness from Kepler 186f and return to Sanctuary, they carried with them the satisfaction of having achieved the impossible. They had not just saved a world, they had helped heal the damage caused by toxic competition and restored a species to their natural cooperative state. But the implications of their success extended far beyond one world. For the first time in galactic history, the network had successfully intervened to prevent the extinction of a species trapped in competitive consciousness. The technique developed by human volunteers had proven that cooperation could be taught across interstellar distances, that consciousness itself could serve as a bridge between worlds. Back on Sanctuary, as Chen's awareness settled back into her human body, she realized that humanity had evolved again. They were no longer just bridges between individual and collective consciousness, they were healers, capable of helping other species overcome the psychological damage that prevented them from joining the galactic network. Elena, her consciousness still expanded across multiple worlds, spoke with a voice that carried the gratitude of an entire civilization. The Kethmari are asking to join the network. They want to help heal other worlds that have suffered similar damage. Captain Chen, who had begun this journey as a refugee from a dying Earth, smiled as she contemplated humanity's newest role in galactic civilization. They had become something unprecedented, a species of healers who could spread cooperative consciousness across the galaxy, helping other civilizations overcome the competitive toxicity that trapped them in cycles of self-destruction. As she looked out through the observation dome at the silver forests of Sanctuary, Chen could see the future stretching ahead of them. Humanity would continue to evolve, continue to adapt, continue to discover new ways to bridge the gap between individual intelligence and cosmic consciousness. They had come to Sanctuary as the last survivors of a competitive civilization. They were leaving as ambassadors of cooperation, equipped with the knowledge and skills needed to heal a galaxy one world at a time. The transformation was complete, but the journey had just begun. Among the stars, civilizations trapped in competitive cycles awaited healing, and humanity, no longer merely human, was ready to answer their call.